And tonight, some real intense Doctor Who debate that will get you behind the sofa as we go live with the Sensor channel at 6.
Hello. Well, let's see how this one goes. There may be gremlins in the works. I hope you can see me or hear me. Now, tonight's show, my gosh, this is one of the big ones, isn't it? Russell T Davies has written Queer as Folk, It's a Sin, Bob and Rose, Cucumber, The Second Coming, Years and Years, and had a successful stint as showrunner 2005 to 10 with Doctor Who. Some of you were looking forward to his return, as I was, since the show was in such a challenging position in the TV ratings and the mindset of some of the TV audience. We needed someone who knew the show and understood it. So now we've had a few months since the showing of season 1 and the specials and Christmas episode. Do we feel that Russell T Davies still has that common touch, knowing what the TV public wants, and more to the point, understands the Doctor Who TV show itself? Good evening. Hopefully you're up for this one. I partly did this, and I'll give a shout out to Lee Smith, who last week I had to record because I wasn't here, and so we did a show on Russell T Davies, didn't we, from before the season started, and I thought it was an interesting one to see how we'd all evolved. And Lee Smith said, you should be doing this live. This would be a really good debate. And I know what you mean. So we're doing it live. It's like a sequel. We're going to talk about any version of Russell T Davies' life, his legacy on Doctor Who, his impact on Doctor Who, his influence on Doctor Who. And I don't know what the panel are going to say. I don't think they know what they're going to say. So I've planned this crazy, crazy stream full of topics. I'll see where we go. But of course, you can lead us too. And so please help us with this one, because it's going to be, I think, quite tasty. So, you know, I've been almost obsessive about this. He seems to be the only topic in mind as we wonder whether we will get a season 3 commissioned, when we know he's penning the 5-part spin-off series, The War Between the Land and the Sea, and penning a lot of season 3 now as I speak. You know that I've been doing last Sunday, there you go, the Real Exposed RTD. That was what started it all, the Imagine documentary. Of course, we did a show, Showrunner Savior or Showrunner Destroyer. We said, has there been too much sex in the TARDIS? That was a good one. I obsessed with my saloons. Is Russell T Davies the real villain of Doctor Who? As a contentious question. The mixed messaging I talked about, the great one. And I went on and on, didn't I? I mean, I shocked myself how I felt this season was going. And hence why we are where we are. Okay? So I thought it was apt. Even with the Tales of the TARDIS and cultural appropriation being mentioned, I thought, here we go again. So buckle in, as tonight we are live and we are fairly... Well, sorry, we'll be fairly honest and assess the legacy of RTD on Doctor Who as a whole. We will give him a fair shout. And I've got a range of panelists tonight to make sure that there is no echo chamber. I have some very tasty, interesting quotations from various sources from 2003 onwards, so we can see if he has changed or is changing the show to how he wants. And I've got an exhaustive list of quotations. I'm exhausted. So, are we ready for your questions and comments at various points throughout the show? Well, give us a like. Switch on your notifications. You know the score now. You know the drill. Send us a subscription. Check if you have subscribed. That would help. But thank you for those who already have. I totally appreciate it. We might manage to slot in an educating RTD feature since he is the star of the show tonight. We might even have a joke about Do Not Disturb Sutek and where is he sleeping tonight on the TARDIS. And my last housekeeping, of course, is get me on X, give me a DM, email me on Sensosphere. There you go. Housekeeping done. Now, the fun bit now is you might see my panelists. I might not because the gremlins are in the works. Ooh. So let's see if they do work or not. So, of course, I'm going to welcome. I've had him on once before. Simon Lydiard. You may well know him pretty well. Most fans do. Scaro magazine, a fanzine founder. Here we go. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Brendan.
Well, it's good to be talking to. Well, I can't see you, but I know you're there.
Yeah, I know I'm here.
You are definitely here. Oh gosh, this is going to be like hocus pocus. This. So I've prepared a slide for you because I thought, let's get talking about this as good old fans. And so here we go. You've got. I mean, which iteration there? You've got Jodie Whittaker looking as though she's putting some arsenic or something in William Hartnell's drink there. This is the thing with, and you know this from doing fanzines, don't you, Simon? The toxicity in fandom can get in there.
Yeah.
Which doctor's your preference? That sort of thing. So, yes. We'll see where the bodies are buried tonight, Simon. Yeah, not just maybe in the River Thames in Dalek Invasion. So anyway, good to see you. I know you've been busy and I appreciate your time for coming on. Thank you. Right. Let's see if I can get another invisible person on to me. So, Gary, hello.
I'm not really here, Brendan. You're just hearing my voice in your head.
It's like some sick nightmare, isn't it? So,
was that picture you just showed the cover of one of the upcoming Big Finish sets with the First Doctor and Jodie? I really hope not.
Oh, are we all praying for that? So there you go. I mean, when you know about the toxicity of in fandom, and I've hit it with this stream, and I'm sure, like I said to Simon, he fits in the 70s with Scaro fanzine. Sometimes,
absolutely
the contentious debates and stuff like that. But to go back to the Daleks, the beginning, I mean, it just gives me, it's a comfort blanket to me, I have to say.
Of course. No, I mean, this is Dalek Invasion of Earth, is it? The dials. I'm going by the dials.
What do you reckon, Simon?
Really sure.
I think it looks like it. Yeah.
What do you think, Simon? Only because I recognize, they use similar dials for the movies, which I love and have seen about 1 million times.
But actually, Gary, I prepared this one for you because I know.
Oh, see, Simon, he knows that I love Wendy Padbury's outfits. So that's what he did. So obviously, the one on the left is from the Space Pirates, and the one on the right is unmistakable. There's only one where she wore a groovy feather boa, and that was the Invasion.
Of course, a great story.
Is there anything more 60s than that? Those outfits on the right.
Oh, but it brings
just
fun.
Great.
It brings fun to Doctor Who as well.
It's great.
I wonder if our Queen of Woke would like an outfit like that now, whether she, if she's in role, maybe. But anyway, here we go. Queen of the Woke, the red carpet's out.
Thank you.
Good to see you. I actually can now see everybody. Oh my gosh, my vision is not impaired.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So,
you wiped off the paint. The
see
paint
that's the secret. Rachel comes on screen and everybody's eyes are opened and everything works.
So is this a nice comfort blanket for you, Rachel? A bit of John Pertwee, a bit of the Whomobile, a bit of his Stardust.
Yeah. Is that the Sea Devils on the right?
Yeah.
Oh, I got it right. Oh my goodness. That never happens. Like I can never put the pictures to the name. Yeah, I do like John Pertwee.
I mean, since tonight we're going to really reappraise the whole of the impact of RTD, and he's what he's doing with Doctor Who and what he's done to Doctor Who, good or bad. When you look at this, were you happy with the third Doctor being a big change? You know, some called him the James Bond Doctor, that sort of thing, because that was a big change.
It was a huge change. Personally, not my cup of tea, but he's not my least favorite Doctor. So, you know, I can cope with the change there. I mean, he's still smart, he's still intelligent and everything like that. He's just got a bit of the Caped Crusader with it, hasn't he?
Yeah, a bit of
In this case.
Simon, who would you guess is Rachel's least favorite Doctor?
Oh gosh, well, since we've only just met,
just take a wild guess.
That's a bit difficult to guess. I can't. I've got no clue.
Well,
think. Well, okay. Here's a hint. She's the only person in the world that thinks that.
Lisa Tom Baker, then.
There you go.
Yes, you got it in one.
Yes, she'd love him. She'd love him to replace Stavros in that little cryogenic chamber there.
Please don't send the chat into meltdown, Gary. They already, they've already had to go over
No, I'm sure. You know, I'm sure Rachel will be saying more provocative things on her own as we go along.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yes.
I'm sure. No, it's nothing to do with Tom's acting.
Rachel, I would like hikes, not unlike hikes. I mean,
or unsubs. Yeah, right.
I know, Rachel. Rachel, instead of you being Queen of the Rock, you're going Ice Queen on Tom Baker here. So let me try.
Oh, very good.
So here we go.
There we go. I'll get you demonetized.
Oh, but come on then. That's
nice. That was recent, that one, wasn't it?
It was this week, actually. Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah.
And I'm not being, I thought she was dead. I thought she was killed in Devil's Cord.
Is she inaugurating him into the House of Lords?
It looks like it, doesn't it, Simon? Yeah. I hope he gets 300 quid a day for doing that.
Gary, look what you've done to the chat. Thank you. They're all against. Oh.
Everybody, come on now, everybody.
No, I do like him.
Hey, everybody in the chat, reserve your annoyance and ire for RTD. Don't put it on Rachel.
The infidel must be silenced. That's funny. That is funny.
Oh, well.
So an infidel.
So tonight, as I said, it's a sequel to last week, which was a recorded item. And I know quite clearly, and I'm sure you've seen it on your channel, Rachel, I think people still want to maybe talk about RTD a little bit longer. And so this is our final words for now before I go on my holidays in 2 weeks or so. And so I promise you on my stream, it won't be much of RTD until I get back in October. So, but I'll show you tonight. There is a show that's going to be on while I'm away. So tonight, Russell T Davies, he's written a fair bit of stuff, hasn't he? He was on Why Don't You? Bob and Rose. We had Casanova there. It's a Sin. We had Years and Years, of course. And I can't miss out Queer as Folk. So, he'd been around the block and developed a hell of a reputation in the media world. He developed his power base as well, because I think when he did Queer as Folk, he was an outsider. And he certainly has become part of the media establishment. When you first heard, all of you, that RTD was coming into Doctor Who in 2000, it was around 2003, 2004, it was announced. What was your response then?
Well, I knew some of his work already. I had seen Queer as Folk. I knew how well established he was as a writer, and I knew how much he loved Doctor Who. And actually, you mentioned earlier, Brendan, the sort of toxicity in fandom. I'd sort of taken a real break from fandom for quite a long time, even though I continued to love the program. And I made a very conscious decision when I knew Doctor Who was coming back that I would like it, unless I really, really didn't. So I approached it with a very open mind, expecting to enjoy it, and I did.
Yeah, Gary.
Well, being over here in the US, the only thing I knew of Russell T Davies when he was announced was that he'd written a couple of the New Adventures in the 90s, the Seventh Doctor continuation books.
Yeah.
So other than that, I mean, I had no clue because none of these shows, made it over to the US, and I probably wouldn't have even watched them had they did. So, but I know when I started watching it, I was kind of thrown, and, still don't love the way that he tried to kind of shoehorn all the kind of domestic soap opera, elements into the show, because I'd had, years and years and years of loving Classic Who, which was kind of my template. And some of what he did I thought was really good, and some of it was, just not what I thought the program should be doing.
Rachael, was it good news for you?
I really can't answer that, because I would have been. When did you say it was?
2003 it was announced.
2003. So I wouldn't have known much of Russell T Davies at that point, because I would have only just left school. So
okay. That's all right. So, I for one was excited, because I thought, gosh, the BBC are taking Doctor Who seriously. If you've got a producer and writer like Russell T Davies, who he did gritty drama scene then, he knew how to write a decent script. He knew how to write character. You suddenly thought, oh my gosh, in the whole history of Doctor Who, I've not seen somebody in charge of the show with the credentials already power-packed behind him. Verity Lambert became big after Doctor Who.
Yeah.
It was the other way around. She did, got her own film production company and everything. Philip Hinchcliffe was on his way. I'm not talking about the writers per se, because Robert Holmes and a lot of them were well established, I know. But I'm saying on the production front, with his writing head on as well, and some of the ideas he's had, I thought, gosh, this is BBC up in the stakes here. And it certainly changed, I think, the vibe. Gosh, somebody from that kind of gritty background to go for Doctor Who. Wow. So I don't know. That was my feel at the time. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
I think one thing also to bear in mind is, obviously, Doctor Who had run almost continuously from 63 to 89. There was obviously the attempt to bring it back with the TV movie in 96, and then with Russell bringing it back, it was a complete. It related to the previous series, but it was an actual relaunch. I think the biggest attempt to reimagine the program and relaunch it that had ever happened up to that particular point. So I certainly understand what Gary's saying, but I think Russell wanted to just really rethink it, which is a really difficult thing to do for such a long-running program, to just say, I'm just going to almost like write a new writer's brief, come up with a new conception of it, rethink the way we're going to deal with relationships. Yes, think about how are we going to deal with domesticity in it, and if so, how.
Yeah.
And by the way, he loved soaps.
Yeah.
So that was a big influence on the domesticity aspect of it.
So Gareth here, when I heard he was doing it, I knew he would preach at us. Do you know, Gareth, I have to be truthful. I didn't think that when it was 2003. I heard people saying that when he returned. And even then, I was still being on the optimistic side. I've got to be honest on that one. I have since evolved, as you all know. Subtle at first. Once he came back, I knew it would be preached on steroids. I have to say, I didn't feel that at the time. I didn't think he had that history, but maybe I was wrong. So before we go pitching right into, and honestly, panel, and thread, you can take this in any direction. I'm not going to want to just steer it, although I'm ready to if there's a vacuum. But just before we go too far into it, I think we need to kind of set out from the outset, we're not RTD haters. We are not here to do a hatchet job on him. I have been on a journey this year, it feels like, from being very open to what's happening, and this channel wasn't it, to just another disappointing episode, another disappointing episode, another disappointing episode. And then with the background of some of the interviews he was given, you just started to feel a little bit got at, So it's been interesting. But before we go way into that, so I want to start with you, Rachael. something in that first era, 2005 to 2010, where you thought RTD got it right? An area of the show you thought, oh gosh, well done. That's what it's needed.
Muted. Series 4 with bringing Catherine Tate back. Like, I know how a lot of people felt about that in the first Impossible Girl storyline. It was the first time, really, I actually think also a family truly worked, and he did actually get it right. That's what I think. Yeah, when they brought Catherine Tate back, he really did get that. That was the right choice. Not this time around, but last time around. That was definitely a good one. And that whole arc and the details that went into that arc, okay, it wasn't perfect, but it was easily the best Impossible Girl story arc that we got.
And actually, reading about it today, doing some of the research, I found that they were saying that the BBC advised him with some of his episodes that he actually co-wrote, and he just wanted the other writer's name on the credits, that they wanted his name on too, because he actually brought the stars into the program that could actually, cast wider for a higher caliber of an actor. So basically, you mentioned Catherine Tate, Rachel, but obviously if you look at that 2005 to 10, he got some interesting stars on. I have to say, you thought, wow.
Yeah, he did. He certainly did. And I just say with the Catherine Tate one, that was actually a huge risk bringing her back as well. That was a really big risk. That could have easily written off the show at that point because of what people think about her initial portrayal of Donna. So it was a big risk.
Yes, the Runaway Bride was a bit. Gary, Gary, on the positivity front first, because I think people will listen to us if we're fair with RTD and actually say some of his successes with Doctor Who.
Yeah, I think that if we're focused on that initial era, I think that he was wise to bring in writers that had proven themselves in the wilderness years through either Big Finish or, the New Adventures, the Missing Adventures, like Rob Shearman, writers like, writers like that, as opposed to, just doing it all himself. I think that there were, and then of course, the casting of Chris Eccleston. I think Tennant was never my favorite, but Eccleston was an amazing find and provided an immediate, legitimacy to the whole enterprise. I mean, when people found out that Doctor Who was coming back, it was more of a, wow, that's kind of cool. But then when Eccleston was announced, then it became, wow, they're really serious about this.
Yeah.
And let me say, I agree with Rachel that of the 4 seasons, in terms of the family domesticity, Donna's family worked the best, obviously, because Bernard Cribbins was there. Although I think Freema Agyeman as Martha was my favorite companion. I think she was the most solid of those companions. I think that I still look at that era and I can really only point, it's the standalones that work for me.
Yeah.
Some of the School Reunion or Girl in the Fireplace, things like that. The arcs, which became bigger and bigger and bigger, and going from one planet being under threat to, by the time he left, all of reality was under threat, which is so huge and vague as to ultimately be kind of whatever. But like I said, so I would say that his biggest success for me was surrounding himself by writers, by solid writers besides himself. I'm staying positive, Brent.
Okay. And before I just as I come to Simon, Farsight says he introduced everything that should never have been added to Doctor Who: soap opera, pop culture, love interests, and a companion who wore more often saves the day than the Doctor? You can answer that, or you can obviously add to your own idea there, Simon, too.
Well, I mean, just quickly on that, the love interest thing, I would say it's been there before. I would certainly say that the third Doctor was kind of almost in love with Jo Grant. He certainly was very sad when she left him.
Now, you see,
another man.
And this is what I mean. I really, this debate can go anywhere, because you're the first person who's come onto my panel who said that. I've seen people tweet it to me, and I've knocked back on them. So I'm going to please help us with this. Are you going to go for the Green Death moment when he seemed upset at the end? Where's your? Can you just help us with a tiny bit of evidence, please?
Yeah, I think you saw. I think what you saw on screen, and I know we're slightly diverting from the main point, but I think what you saw on the screen with John Pertwee and Katie Manning is the two actors becoming more and more fond of each other. And I think that manifested itself on screen. And I think it began to creep into the performances and the relationship between the characters. And certainly with Green Death, it was written so that the Doctor was almost brokenhearted when Jo left him for another man. So yes, that would be my evidence for that. But I think your main point. What was your main point about what had Russell brought?
Yeah, what did he bring to his first era of Doctor Who that you thought was a good choice, and was successful?
Well, I think interesting what Gary is saying about Chris Eccleston. I actually think that was one of his best choices. And I say that because, I mean, actually, at the time when I heard Christopher Eccleston was announced, and I heard Eccleston was doing a number of interviews saying, well, I didn't watch Doctor Who growing up. It was far too posh, far too middle class. It wasn't really for working class people like me. And I thought, oh, God, what are they going to do with it? But what they did was, what Russell did in casting Chris Eccleston and in the way that the character was written was just create a completely new jumping on points for people. Those of us, I'd watched it from the 60s, so fine, I knew all the backstory, but he created an accessible, exciting jumping on point with that characterization of the Doctor. Eccleston is not my favorite of between Tennant and Eccleston. I would choose Tennant, but Tennant was almost the easier casting choice because it seemed more like a classic Doctor. I think with Eccleston, it was quite brave. I don't think put it this way, he only did one season, and I don't think he went as far as I'd like to have seen him go with the characterization. I think there was more to be achieved, and I think Eccleston found some of the lightness of it a little bit difficult to perform. He's quite a dour actor, or appears to be. But I just like the bravery of that casting choice. And also, and someone's already mentioned the Time War in the chat.
Yeah.
The Time War was a fantastic device to say, here's a complete, you can, if you want to, you can forget everything else. Just come on here. It's fresh.
Yeah, I must admit, I was intrigued. I've said in a few of the streams, I mean, not that I think there's a class issue, but the BBC sometimes do portray a certain, in the past, especially 60s and 70s, when they didn't quite develop a regional accent at that point. So Chris Eccleston was an interesting one.
Yeah, every planet has a north.
Yes, and you can imagine that spoke to me suddenly, and that worked. And I have to say, it's the first time in my life that, whether I was at school or now in the workplace, I had teachers saying, because I was a teacher, I had colleagues saying they fancied the Doctor. I thought, oh my God, how's this happened? I know there was a fashion designer who said she liked John Pertwee and stuff like that, but I never really heard in the media people saying they fancied the actor playing the Doctor. So that was fascinating to think, gosh, Doctor Who's landed. So, RTD maybe is doing something to reach out a bit further to get more mass appeal. So I found that really interesting and exciting at the time, I have to say. Right. Okay. Let's just kind of trundle along to this. This is actually, and I'll go big screen so you can kind of just be reminded, these are all the stories that actually RTD has written for Doctor Who, not anybody else. Yes, he was the showrunner, and so he takes credit for other people's, choosing other people. However, we are judging RTD as well from his impact and his influence and his scripts. Now, this is my choice of it up here. The red marks are the ones I just thought stank. They just, I just think they just collapsed, in my view. Yeah. So, for example, in the middle column, the next Doctor, I just thought we were baited, totally baited over this kind of, is there going to be another Doctor? Will we recognize, and all that stuff? And then the Cyber Lord thing, what was it called? The Cyber King, and the Cyber Shade. I struggle with that. And I'm not going to explain all my choices here, but I think it will help the panel and help the thread when I come to the thread. But if you just take a look there, you can see my hits from RTD are Bad Wolf, because I found that quite exciting the first time around. Midnight, I still think, whoa. We did The Stolen Earth the other night, and I still think that episode stands out. Turn Left and The Waters of Mars. You can see I've got amber in the middle there with a touch of light green if they get a little bit better. But you can see Space Babies, Devil's Cord, Empire of Death, Dot and Bubble, I just think sank without a trace. But that's just my opinion. So I've just put them up there just to kind of remind ourselves of his impact. And so I think the thread might just take off in a minute and we might burn up. But I would like to know what everybody thinks. And I'm going to come to the thread after we've talked as a panel about where they think he was best and worst. Because the point is here, because I've only got 5 personally dark green choices of all his stories, and I wasn't trying to keep it minuscule, but I have to say, my question tends to be, does he actually know how to write a good Doctor Who story? I think he can select people who can. I think there's an argument we could have a bit later about whether he can showrun and actually sequence a whole arc. However, can he write a very good Doctor Who story? Gary?
I had dropped out for a second. So tell me, the greens are your least favorite?
The dark green are the best for me.
So then, it goes green.
Yeah, green, light green, then amber, then red. I think I said they just stink.
I will say, and this kind of ties into something that Simon was mentioning. I think that RTD is good at coming up with, and we're talking the original run only. He is good at coming up with decent Doctor Who concepts, and I distinguish that from good Doctor Who scripts. I think that he is better with the general idea, which is why, as Simon said, the Time War idea was so good, even though that was an idea that actually had been created by Alan Moore in this series in the Doctor Who magazine in the 80s, in one of the backup strips, that the Time Lords were involved in a time war, not with the Daleks, but still the concept of a time war originated back then, not with Russell T Davies. He refined it for the TV show. But again, the best things about the Time War is it's kind of similar to the original Star Wars, where we just get lines and hints about the backstory, the history. It's when they get fleshed out and they go from just what anybody can imagine to one final idea only, that he falls down. The Time War was better when he's throwing out ideas like, the Nightmare Child, and it's left to us to wonder what it is.
Yeah.
Versus delving deep and answering every single question, as opposed to realizing, you don't need to. Some things are better left, to the power of the viewer's imagination. We don't need RTD to handhold and give us like every single answer. So that's basically why I'm saying that I think his concepts are much better than his scripts.
And as I come to you, Rachel, I just did it instinctively, the color coding. But when I looked at my color coding, I thought, do you know what? Yeah, 2 of them are the first episodes of a 2-part. In other words, we've discussed, haven't we, in how many streams he can't land the second part. But then Midnight, Turn Left, and Waters of Mars are standalones, and all of those had an element of real tension in them, which I don't think RTD tends to put much in his scripts. Real tension. Midnight, classy. Waters of Mars, really classy, based Under Siege. And then the Time Lord Victorious, interesting thing. And then Turn Left, of course. So when I looked at it, I hear what Gary's saying, and I'm just adding my point a different way, which is he hasn't done much jeopardy and tension, and I think that's where I think he's missing the behind the settee kind of concept of Doctor Who. What about you, Rachel, on what he's written so far?
Well, with Midnight, what really makes Midnight is the actors, because it's a bottled episode, so you've got to have that intensity. And if they hadn't have acted it the way that they did, in the direction that it was taken in, there was no way that would have been as good, as half as good as what it was, so that was all a combination of things there. I've lost my train of thought. What was the question? Sorry.
No, it's really. I mean, I've color coded myself just to kind of help the thread. But basically, you must know from all of RTD's stories whether you think he's a good Doctor Who story writer or.
It's like he has his moments. You know what I mean? He has his moments. Like I think early RTD definitely does better now than current RTD for sure. Can you come back to me? Actually, I need to think of a better answer for that.
I will say though, and this manifested itself on last Wednesday when we were talking about Stolen Earth and Journey's End. I think now that we've kind of marinated in a season's worth of RTD's worst excesses every week, and going back and revisiting his first era, I think some of those problems are more evident.
Yeah.
This time around, instead of having it be a clean divide between, the original era, where he was great, could do no wrong, and then now where it's like all a train wreck. Even in well-regarded stories like Stolen Earth, Journey's End, there was still his tendency to gloss over, like explanations about, well, how'd that happen? Oh, well, no, it just did. Let's keep going. That kind of like, there was more storytelling laziness for him even back then. Not every story, obviously, but there was just more of it than I think people remember.
Right. Well, I'm going to say a proper hello to the thread because they're on fire tonight. I thought they might be because a lot of people were asking me to do this live one. So get the thread read, Brendan, or we're all dead. We've got to kind of give some kind of interest there. So let's have a look at what a few people have been saying. And it'll have to be a few at the moment. I'm trying to pull a lot on as the panelists are talking. Hi, Hayby, Kieran Frood, Ease, Rhoda, Anthony Parkinson. There's a whole load who like Know You, Simon, of course. Paul Richards, the sci-fi fans. Heather was on at the beginning. Sean Cryer, good to see you again. Now, I noticed straight away as we were talking that Midnight seems to have landed pretty well on the choice front. Love and Monsters, not. Those two are getting mentioned, one being Marmite, that kind of thing. Let's have a look. We've had some brilliant points from Farsight and Sadako 24. Mark Anderson knows you of old, he said, Simon.
Well, I am old, that's why.
You've got a hinterland. Babette Bombshell, I lost all trust in RTD's taste when Love and Monsters took an innocent girl and turned her into a block of stone. Yeah, I know. He was trying to, there's a joke in there, but...
I felt it was a bit of a snub to Shirley Henderson, to be honest. She's much better than that.
Yes, yeah. Now, what gets interesting is that documentary had an interview with David Tennant, and he said RTD coming back to Doctor Who is a man with the guardrails off.
Mhm.
Now, that's a very interesting point for him to make. And then, of course, when I was looking around material from the writer's tale, looking from his interviews in 2004 and 5, there's inconsistencies and there's real change. You see at the top there, on how to write, he says, he's very last minute. Now that's allowed. Some of us are crammers, and then I leave it some more. Eventually, I leave it till I'm desperate. I always think I'm not ready. Now I know some writers do that. They have ideas everywhere. It's forming in their heads. So I'm not criticizing that, but it might just indicate a few other things about show running. He says, I mean, and if everybody has read the writer's tale, he does make that point on the second line there. I don't know how A connects to B. He has an idea for a certain event, an idea of a certain character moment, but he hasn't worked out how they join, and sometimes they're worked out as he's going through it. For example, the 4 knocks with Bernard Cribbins. He didn't know the 4 knocks was going to be the Bernard Cribbins Wilf character. And he was saying to Benjamin Cook, the 4 knocks, he mentioned them in the Planet of the Dead, didn't know why or how it was going to end, but it was going to end like that. So it's interesting, and I'm not criticizing per se, because some writers, that's how their ideas germinate. Anyway, normally I'll leave it till a deadline, and I haven't even started writing. This has become over the years a week beyond the deadline, or even more. It can be a week or weeks past the delivery date, and I haven't started writing. In fact, I don't have delivery dates anymore. I go by the start of pre-production date. I consider that to be my real deadline, and then I miss that. It's a cycle that I cannot break. And then, of course, his quote from this year, he talks about slaving over every word, and I've sat there till 2 a.m. deciding whether a sentence begins with and or but or the or yet. And I'm thinking, do you know what? Okay, go on, Gary. Your feedback on that.
First of all, if from the quote from the writer's tale on the top, I'm listening to you read it, and I'm thinking that it sounds like he's talking as if that's almost something that he's proud of, that he blows every deadline weeks past the delivery date, as opposed to having it be a source of complete professional shame. It's like, what kind of professional does that? Because when you have all these people depending on you and just waiting for you, and now, remember a few weeks ago, Brendan, he talks about now he'll even rewrite the script on, the night before once he sees the rushes. It's like, how is that even professional? But then, as regarding the quote at the bottom, I almost kind of, it's like, Russell, maybe you should spend a little bit less time agonizing at 2 a.m, whether to say but or yet, and ask yourselves a little bit more fundamental questions, like, is having, Sutek as a dog sitting on top of the TARDIS anything less than a completely moronic idea? It's like, learn to ask yourselves the right question, Russell, and not agonize over the things that don't matter.
I'm not even sure that quote from, is it the writer's tale? I can't see it.
It predates the writer's tale, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't worry.
Okay. It doesn't sound credible to me. It may sound credible when you're not a showrunner.
Yeah.
But if you're a showrunner, I'm not sure how you can actually work like that, because, as Gary said, there are people depending on you. So I'm not really sure. He may have said it. I'm not really sure whether that's what he's doing.
Although it intrigues me with the Chris Eccleston falling out with Bad Wolf. I don't know why. I don't know if it was style behind the scenes, a bit of politics. There were rumors also that some of the scripts were very late.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm curious. And I want to know, like, what all of you think. If you were an exec, like, say, like at the BBC, or even, running like a theater production, right? And you knew that either the writer that you were hiring or the showrunner that you were hiring, that was his work ethic, would you hire somebody like that, knowing what you'd be setting yourself up for, knowing the grief that you'd be setting yourself up for by putting somebody who works like that? And I'd be saying this about anybody, not just Russell T Davies, whether it's you fill in the blank with any name. I'm just saying that anybody that works like that has no business being in charge of like a huge production. And I'm curious now, as Sadako said in Eccleston, no wonder there was that chaos during the first season that caused Eccleston to walk. I'm absolutely sure now, looking at this, that had to be part of it.
Yeah. I mean, Simon, you've obviously had a lot of executive experience, and we had a stream recently where you give me a few interesting insights. So when you hear that, you heard Gary's point about would you appoint anybody like that? What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, but my executive experience is quite minor. It's running a country. It's not nowhere near as important as running Doctor Who.
I'm glad you've got your perspectives right. Yeah,
but I'm just reminded of what Douglas Adams used to say about deadlines. He said he loved deadlines. He loved the sound of them whizzing past him. But then the issue there is there's a difference between. Look, if you're engaging a writer because they're a brilliant writer, you put up with their foibles if you want their brilliance, okay? But that's different to having overall responsibility for running a show, being a showrunner, where you do have that obligation to, as Gary said, to the rest of the team, and that's why I'm not. I don't know. I don't know, but I'm not convinced that I'm not convinced Russell's working like that at the moment. If he is, okay, I am surprised, because it doesn't really work if you've got that level of responsibility.
One thing, Rachel.
Really quickly, just to clarify that, Brendan, go ahead and to Simon's point, go ahead and if you could, like, summarize that point that Russell T Davies made recently about the whole rewriting. Because after he sees the rushes,
yes. I mean, I nearly put the quote up. Actually, I've got it somewhere. But basically, he said, as they do, he's somewhere else in the country. He sees the rushes for the day from Shooty and Millie, and based on what he sees and maybe their chemistry and dynamic, he adapts his writing and rewrites. So basically, I've got a quote later on, if we get to it, where Shooty said he was quite surprised that he wasn't given much direction on the type of characterization for this Doctor, that he was told to just go and have fun, really. I have to say, a lot of producers have done that with Doctor Who, because they want the actor to bring something to it, don't they?
Yeah.
But Shooty was surprised by that. And then when you add to the fact that he's reading he's looking at the rushes, his RTD, and then adapting his writing, you're thinking, right, okay, does this work for every case? It obviously didn't work for Chris Eccleston, and Shooty is politely just saying he was a bit surprised. Yeah. I mean, I'll keep throwing up various sins here. Now, this is obviously from the early doors. I mean, God, remember this, 2005. And
is this? Oh, I thought this was from next season.
It could be. I remember the arguments then, and I think a lot of my points tonight are going to be when we reappraise RTD's impact and influence and decision making. Did he get it right then? Has he got it right now? So in 2005, he said, it's Saturday night. You're up against the big light entertainment shows like Ant and Dec with a shiny, bright, colourful, huge audience with background music behind everything. They're phenomenally loud, those shows. And I believe that's what draws an audience. So we decided to make Doctor Who really noisy. So, when you read stuff like that, and what happened, of course, we don't have to do a time machine. Do you feel RTD had to make that choice in 2005 to go loud and brash and colourful to replicate ITV? Because I always thought Doctor Who always made its own niche anyway. And I thought good scheduling, whether you're BBC One, ITV, Channel 4, whatever, is you don't repeat the same at the same time. Why would you do that? If you've got loud and brash on one side, you do a different version on the other, and you try and find that other audience. Anyway, the ratings were good. So I'm not knocking it in one way. It's just that did he start to distort the Doctor Who brand by saying it had to be loud, colourful, and brash? When actually, I think it should be dark, menacing, tense.
The thing
You
is,
know?
I think he got it wrong in that sense, because the thing about is that's Saturday Night Takeaway, isn't it? The thing
Yeah.
about Saturday Night Takeaway and Ant and Dec is that really people tune in to watch Ant and Dec because they've got charisma, they're entertaining, they're really funny, and they're good at acting. They can sing, they can do all sorts of things. These two men, and they've been a double act ever since Biker Grove, right? So whatever they're going to be doing, people are going to watch naturally. So he was competing really more with the personalities of Ant and Dec rather than the loudness of this show. And he should have just kept it in the direction that Doctor Who should actually be.
This is the first time I've seen this quote, and I'm just kind of like gobsmacked. It's like, if I was like an executive and Russell was kind of making a case for why I should hire him, and he said this, I'd feel like, thanks for coming, make sure we validate your parking, because yeah, okay. It says background music behind everything, phenomenally loud. Okay, so does that mean that every show that audiences, that's the only thing audiences want? They're kind of like squirrel, as long as audiences can be distracted with shiny, loud, noise, that's all they want. So why, so does that mean that you take various genre shows, I don't know, The Professionals or Call the Midwife or something? Why aren't those all shiny, loud noise with music if that's the only thing audiences are interested in seeing? It's like, okay, Russell, yeah, that audiences may want it for that kind of light entertainment show. Why would you assume that audiences want those same things in every single type of show that they watch,
But
especially in Doctor Who? That just makes no sense to me.
And yet it makes sense to what you saw in season 1 of 2005, which maybe shocked the audience and did grab a mass appeal for a while. And I have to grant that. But the point is, it changes the rhythm of the show, and it changes the rhythm of the plotting, and it gets rid of cliffhangers, and it gets rid of various things, because he would only allow a cliffhanger to be in the prequel, like Mark Gatiss's Unquiet Dead. Little bits like that, the screaming woman at the screen at the TV, and then you go into the credits. If he believes that is the only way you can do Doctor Who in modern culture, then it has to be fast, larger than life characters, Murray Gold loud music, as it was in 2005 and 6, wasn't it? It's very loud. And then you're not able to have those lovely quiet scenes. You're not able to have those moments of development. That's why you suddenly get Daleks in color with that big re-edited, massive kind of, load of music in the middle to maybe pop it up. You can't have a quiet scene. You can't have William Hartnell sat there talking to Susan at the end of Edge of Destruction. You'd have to, pile it in.
I think though that's an interesting point, because I think when the program came back in 2005, and the same actually with this new season 1 that we've just seen, they were both very, very explicit relaunches of Doctor Who, and trying to find what the modern audience was. I actually thought with Russell's first period as showrunner, it became more sophisticated as it went on. If you remember episode 1, Rose, which I loved, and it was great, and it was a relaunch, but it even included fart jokes.
Yes,
with the or belch jokes rather, with the bin, I think, and then you had fart jokes with the Slovene later on in the season. So I mean, Russell in 2005 was, I think, more consciously trying to set it for a younger audience who probably are used to faster, brighter, more colourful, louder entertainment. And I actually think that's an element of what he's done. In fact, he's pretty much said that with the new relaunch with Disney. He's pretty much said that he's much more looking for a younger audience. Now, I think one of the great beauties of Doctor Who is its variety, is that it can do various different kinds of storytelling, various tones, and yeah, for me, I mean, going back to the original, the classic series, I absolutely adore season 7, the first Pertwee season.
Yeah.
But actually, I adore it more now. Now I'm in my 60s than I would have done when I was 7 years old at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the variety, and I think probably in that first season when it came back in 2005, and again now, maybe people feel there's too much of the razzmatazz. But I would say as well that in the season we've just seen, we had Boom and 73 Yards. There's fairly dark stuff in that.
Yeah,
I just want to agree with Simon. Season 7 is my all-time favorite Who season, period, full stop.
Yeah,
it's also Quatermass, which is why I love.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
now,
absolutely.
I'm by the way, I will show you trigger points and ideas. You don't have to respond to every one as it, that's not my intention, but you might just want to grab something as you see it. On the color of Doctor Who, he has said recently about the Christmas specials. He Doctor Who Christmas specials, which weren't a thing, remember, that didn't exist in classic Who. This nonsense that suddenly there's a Doctor Who Christmas special. Now, he's invented this. So he says, I think it's a great family time, whatever family you've got, whether it's your real family, chosen family, invented family, there is something that fits Doctor Who about that. Christmas is just big. It's got a big theme. It's got music. It's got a soundtrack. There's a color and warmth that he keeps saying, color, warmth, loudness, and size to it that we try to bring to Doctor Who. Some of my favorite episodes around Christmas of Doctor Who were just good bog standard Doctor Who stories. And, you just continued. I think Robot came just after Christmas, didn't it? Or around about then, I seem to recall.
Yeah, it was late December, I think.
Yeah.
Was when that debuted.
God, if Robot was suddenly rebroadcast to be on Christmas Day with RTD as showrunner, oh my God, can you imagine what Robot would look like?
I mean, based on this quote, I really think we should just do Russell and ourselves a favor, move him off Doctor Who and let him run Strictly Come Dancing. Because clearly, based on this, quote, that's the kind of thing that I think he wants to do.
And that's actually, Gary, was quite a debate in the 1980s because a lot of people saw John Nathan Turner as a very good light entertainment producer who wanted color and big stars and kind of flashing stuff. And a lot of criticism of JNT was that he wasn't doing the sort of darker stuff, stronger stories telling at the time.
In retrospect, though, I mean, you're right. But in retrospect, I think that JNT has to, had a lot of great instincts in terms of letting, when to kind of hand things over to, his script editors or what. I mean, he had the big ideas about, we're bringing back the Cybermen, whatever. And some of them were misconceived. I mean, nobody's 100%. But I think in retrospect, JNT, I would put as overall much more of a success in his run.
I just thought it was
Russell's been.
I thought it was so unfair in that documentary when the Bad Wolf team, it's either Julie or Jane, actually say that the 1980s Doctor Who was kind of parody Doctor Who. It was showbiz Doctor Who, and if they have that viewpoint, you do feel as though, well, hold on, then I can criticize them quite openly here. Sean Cryer, I just want to use your point. We're talking about the Christmas specials. Yeah, there were. They don't all have to be about bloody Christmas. How narrow is his vision? Look, I'll give credit to Art. I'm going to be fair here. RTD says he likes to show the outsiders in society, the people who are upset, the emotionally fragile. Okay, fair enough. If he's that bothered and very concerned and very sensitive, not everybody has a decent Christmas and wants it rammed down their throats. And I have to say, if you really do think about it, the diet you get at Christmas is family, family, family. And not everybody has a happy Christmas. And so some of us, you wouldn't mind just a Doctor Who episode with no snowmen, with no kind of nonsense like that. You just get a Doctor Who episode of escapism. You
Yeah,
know,
it's funny. Sort of also the suggestion that the Christmas specials were invented in the new era. They were insofar as they're conceived, but in the 1970s we had Christmas specials which were just omnibus editions.
oh yes,
Because I clearly remember Christmas 1972 watching the Sea Devils, the omnibus of the Sea Devils, and it's the first time I think I'd seen Doctor Who in colour. And it was fantastic because we were at my great aunt's house for Christmas. So they were real treats, those sort of Christmas omnibus editions in the 70s.
Yeah.
And it's great that they include a lot of those. They've been including a lot of those in the collection set.
Yeah, I love that.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, then try this one then, because we're judging. All we're doing is judging RTD now after quite a long period. Has he changed for the better, for the worse, good impact, negative impact? Does he understand Doctor Who? When it comes to this, now I'll go bigger because there's two quotes there. The one at the very
Brendan,
top,
why are you trying to provoke us today?
I'm not, I've got a range of stuff, honestly.
Listen, Gary, you've already tried to provoke the chat, so you're walking on thin ice, man.
So basically, here he joked. This is from the writer's tale. He says a blog on the Media Guardian says, "I made the show too childish, too camp, and too gay." Too gay? What the hell does too gay mean? Seriously. And then obviously I go more up to date from an interview this year where he says they weren't exactly the straightest men in the past. That's the Doctors. You're talking about someone who does have a lightness and a joy about him. To me, it chimes with queer energy. We're not going to be delivering a neutered Doctor. And just to add to that, on this criticism, from The Guardian, and he said, "I love having debates with people when they are debates, but some people you just can't debate with them. Some people shouldn't be given the oxygen." And
i.e. anybody that disagrees with him.
Yeah, YouTubers.
And so just to remind you, so, he was criticized by The Guardian, which is fascinating because where his politics is, and he didn't like that. And then you get his pushback. And then in Wild Blue Yonder, he had the Doctor, the 14th Doctor, saying, "Oh, is that who I am now? I fancied Sir Isaac." Well, he wasn't Sir then, was he? I fancied Isaac Newton. And she says, of course, "Well, it was never far from the surface." So suddenly you've got a showrunner writer who's actually saying, "I got criticized for making the show too childish, too camp, and too gay." Too gay, what the hell does that mean? But the Doctors were never straight in their iterations. I could go on and on and on because recently in one of his quotes, he said, "Wasn't Anita Dobson as Mrs. Flood on the top of the roof in the last episode of Empire of Death? Wasn't that the campest scene you'll ever see on TV?" And he was so proud of it. So when we talked about colour, pizzazz, being bombastic, and Doctor Who in 2005 to fight Anton Deck, we've also gone
Nice Anton Deck.
yeah, they must be obliterated. But we also, is there a correlation here that while you go colourful, faster, maybe lighter touch, no depth in the story, he's now been accused of being too childish, too camp, and too gay? You mentioned Simon the Farts and all the rest. We had the Pooh babies this year. I saw the scene with the Slitheen. You got Penelope Wilton playing an MP talking about the smell of their farts. So anyway.
Yeah, you've been a teacher, Brendan. You must be familiar with that kind of humour.
Well, yeah. Secondary school, it gets a bit more. You see, this is it. And Simon, when you were talking about, he said he's pitching for the younger market, and I'm thinking, but Genesis of the Daleks didn't mention Davros pooing or farting or anything. It was just a brilliant story. I mean, does RTD think that our generations have sank? Because then he's blaming me. I've taught for 30 years. I'm not aware he's been in schools or anything, but he seems to be saying that society's dipped.
I don't know. I think he just has a view about bringing in a much younger audience, and that's something, where you pitch it in terms of if you're aiming for a particular age group, where you pitch it, that's changed dramatically over the years, because although it's never been made by the children's department at the BBC, it's fairly clear that when it started, it was principally for children. You can argue it was for a family audience. We've spoken about season 7 of the classic series. That clearly wasn't, apart from Spearhead from Space. And when you get to the Hinchcliffe era, that clearly isn't for primary school children. I mean, I hope they watched it and enjoyed it, but it is not aimed at their age group. Russell, I think, has made a conscious decision to. I think he probably feels he's giving something nice and fun and enjoyable to a younger generation in a world where things are generally pretty miserable. So I think he probably feels he's doing them a favor.
But when you were, I mean, I've got those quotes as well when he talks about we're in dark times, so they need the emotional doctor. So when I was being taught how to hide under a table in case there was a nuclear explosion in the 1980s, that was a lighter time. And Genesis of the Daleks was a bad idea to show me, Warriors of the Deep. I just think, why does RTD think this generation are facing it darker than anybody else? I think people after the Second World War had it a bit dark. Rationing, stuff like that, rebuilding society. I hear what he's saying, and I think there's a sensitivity to him. I'm not knocking that, but I think he's not maybe getting it right, because I think escapism is not giving us more of what is in front of us. Sometimes escapism has just given us an optimism by leaving this planet alone and going somewhere else. That's just
let's keep in mind and not forget RTD's own words, which is that the only thing that he's interested in right now is writing. The only kind of writing he's interested in doing is writing about gay issues for a gay audience. I didn't make that up. He said that. So we have to start off by taking him at his word on that. I think that RTD, and this is not a slam, I'm going by just what he says. I think that he is a gay man, obviously writing fiction for his main target audience, which is a gay audience, about issues where he seems to still think that it's the late 70s, early 80s as far as gay acceptance goes. He seems to talk all the time about he feels in danger, that the world is a darker place, there's no acceptance. I think that I don't know, maybe he needs the world to, maybe he needs to think that the world is functioning like that still in order for him to be able to write about how he does. I've always thought that, especially after this season, that whatever, and I really am not trying to be like knee-jerk insulting. I'm just going by, the issues and everything that were brought up in like the last 13 episodes. It seems like whatever kind of delusions and neuroses that he's dealing with in his personal life, he's using the show to kind of like work through it. It's almost as like, the show's become like a therapy writing exercise, that he would get assigned between sessions. And that's why he comes up with stuff like Rogue or what was I've even forgotten the name of the Beatles one, thankfully.
Devil's
Chord.
Devil's Chord. Something that seems to be where his passion and his interest in, because that's what his life interest is.
Well, I've got to mention that. I mean, this is where I'm just fascinated by, and just where people stand. I mean, obviously, I'm gay, and I think it's a less darker time for gay people. So I'm not quite sure. I think this quote at the top, when he says he's been accused of it being too childish, too camp, and too gay, he picks on the too gay thing. But the point is, and that's why I was saying to Simon about some of the puerile humor. I can't remember too much of classic Who doing puerile humor, and I have to say that it's as a teacher, you're told to pitch above the kids, but not too far. So when you're pitching for a younger audience, which is, I think Doctor Who always has, as Simon was saying, it was even in the children's department, but it pitched above them most of the time. You could see the episodes where they patronized. You could see it. It didn't work. It didn't land. I just think RTD is not pitching. That's my issue with him. If he thinks that's his market, you still pitch above them, RTD. That's what you do.
I agree.
He definitely doesn't pitch above them. He needs to. My introduction to Doctor Who was watching VHSs at my friend's house of Earthshock and the Twin Dilemma. Those were like 7, 8 years old, however old I was at the time. Those were above my head. Going in, watching an episode about Cybermen and a companion dying to a companion getting throttled. That's quite something. And I was like, whoa, what on earth is going on in these 2 episodes,
Yeah.
It's quite an introduction to Doctor Who.
So,
I mean, Brendan, you and I have both been teachers. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd agree with me that, I mean, you have to, as you just said, you have to put the bar above where the students already are in order to give them something to raise themselves up to strive for, because you don't like lower the bar, because that just keeps them where they already are.
Yeah, because children want to aspire. Children want to learn. And I don't mean learn in that kind of pedagogical way in a classroom.
No,
what I'm saying is they want to discover. And when I was seeing Genesis of the Daleks, there was new language, new concepts, new worlds to discover. I wasn't an expert on Skaro for Genesis of the Daleks because I hadn't seen it for a while. Honestly, you were getting introduced to so many things. This whole idea, of course, I didn't know anything about the Nazis, but the whole idea of that kind of Khalid race was fascinating. And, I mean, it's actually quite a dark, grim story, Genesis. I always mention that. That's those 6 episodes. There's not much joy there. There's not much humor there. But bang.
I mean, I absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So I am kind of trying to sort of put Russell's perspective and what he thinks he's trying to do. I mean, one of the things Doctor Who gave for me is, I mean, I love the series. I've watched it since I was maybe 5 or 6. It made me interested in television drama. It made me interested in science fiction. It made me interested in how you write those kind of things, how you produce those kind of things, the whole creative process. And it made me start reading other science fiction, finding other genre shows. So it was an introduction to me to go out to other things. And yeah, I agree. I think when you're writing for a young audience, it's good to pitch above them, give them something to understand. In the past, people have explained it that the show can operate on several levels.
Yeah.
And I think maybe what we're seeing, or what the criticism is that in some recent episodes, there haven't been the higher levels for people to appreciate. I think it's a bit of a, I mean, I'm finding it difficult. I'm not being as critical as other people of Russell, because I feel that we haven't seen enough yet of his second era.
Right.
The chat's probably going to go crazy and say, no, we've seen far too much. What are you talking about? But I would like to see where he takes it from here, and it will be interesting to see whether those points about it should pitch higher, and some of the criticisms, is he hearing those? Is he being told those by the BBC, Disney? Are there discussions going on? Because in his original run, we did see the program develop and mature. So I'm sort of hoping that is what will happen. But I'm sort of always approach Doctor Who from a perspective of, I'm going to do my best to enjoy this.
Does it
even the fart jokes, by the way?
Simon, does it register with you from when you were running Skaro Fanzine? Because remember, were you doing it around Graham Williams' era?
Yes, I started in 1979 and finished in 1985.
Because are you hearing similar criticisms of the Graham Williams era, which was more humour, a bit puerile? There were more in the TARDIS with those stupid slapstick sounds.
Yeah, there was that. I mean, I think it's of a different scale.
Yeah.
But there were those criticisms at the time. But what a number of us didn't realise is how much of a brief Graham Williams had been given to tone down the horror and the violence. He was explicitly told to do that and to talk up the humour. And I have to say, in retrospect, because we had the season 15 collection box set released not that long ago, I mean, I prefer the Hinchcliffe era, but if you watch season 15, I think Graham Williams still got away with quite a lot.
Yeah,
it's in 16 and 17 that it gets sort of more humorous, and that Tom Baker runs away with himself a bit more than maybe he ought to have done.
I mean,
I just gotta follow up and quickly say I have unreserved love for the Graham Williams era. I think it's absolutely great. I think that it's yes, there are some excesses toward the end, but overall, looking at it as a whole, I mean, extremely well written, very literate, very literary, a lot of literary allusions like through every story, great, companions, classic, a lot of downright classics mixed in. And I'm really glad after all these years that era is getting the reassessment that it's always deserved in terms of being a really valid interpretation of, what the show can be.
Yeah. Rachael, as you're pondering, are you thinking, I mean, we are trying to be fair on this one, but, the argument is puerile, infantile, pitching too low. Where do you stand on this? Have you got a strong opinion on this?
Yeah, it should be. I don't like toilet humor, but it is what it is with RTD in that sense. But the bar should be raised up above children's heads, obtainable, not too far away, but still entertaining at the same time.
Yeah,
you can be funny without fart jokes anyway.
Yeah.
I was watching was it Revenge of the Cybermen the other day, and
I love that.
And the doctor,
my Sky Striker.
I
love that.
The doctor offs a Cyberman with gold or something, I don't know, and then he sort of like had a bit of moment of irresponsibility, and he turns back to the Cyberman before he rescues Sarah Jane, and he's like, or whatever it was he was doing. I can't remember what he said, and she's like, "Come on, get moving," and they have to fly away. But whilst it was irresponsible, it was actually funny, and it was completely alien.
I always thought that if they ever put together a Doctor Who theme park, they would have to use those little boats that Sarah and Harry were in, that they used to traverse the little caves and stuff. I thought, when I first saw that, I thought, oh, those would be so cool to ride in.
The ones that nearly killed Liz Sladen, they're those ones.
Well, okay.
But my point is, you can be funny without the toilet humor.
Well, just before we go into our next little kind of segment talking about RTD, I have mentioned I'm going on holiday. Does that mean Sense3 is disappearing? Well, no, because I've got all these shows lined up. Now, I'll give you... I
don't know. Wait a minute. Rachel, Simon, did we agree to that? I don't think. I must have missed that meeting. I don't think, and in the chat, I don't see where Brendan has permission to do that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this good. And it's all going to be, oh, my God. The puppets are going to run the show. The Who-pets are going to interview and be rude as hell. It's going to be like the Muppets with every panelist who comes on talking about Doctor Who. Here's a snippet. So we will be interviewing one by one whoever dares come on. So the dare is out there, whether it's Gary, Rachel, Simon, all my other panelists, they come on to talk about their love of Doctor Who. The Who Pets have got their questions and they'll stick to them. And you just have to run the risk of getting the abuse and the ridicule based on your answers.
I'm not afraid.
So everybody,
no, the most terrifying thing we've just seen there is the Wirren bubble wrap.
yes. Oh no. And the little the ribbon when it was a little slug when it would yeah, I loved all that. So hopefully you'll join us in the next. I mean, I've still got a couple of streams to go, but look out for the Doctor Who chat show because you'll get a lot of fun, love of Doctor Who. You saw clips then, you'll all recognize them. So RTD, his impact, his legacy, his influence, and whether he actually understands the show anymore or he understands the society better than we do. Here he says, and there's two quotes again. Excuse me, I'll go bigger. He says that he doesn't want to represent any particular section of society. I just want to write good telly. Now, I did find that fascinating because he has seemingly, especially with season 1, seemed to go for a particular section of society he wants to kind of, focus on without me going too detailed. You can see I've highlighted various bits, and I think some of it Simon has referenced where he talks about the dark times, and I do think the world is darkening, and he mentions queer rights there. He's beginning to worry about where we are in society and the need a hero out there cutting his way through the universe. And of course, he's mentioned cultural appropriation in Pyramids of Mars, a concept that I hadn't been really that bothered about. And then, of course, he mentioned the toy maker in the giggle, didn't he? And he made a big thing about the word celestial and a big thing about its Chinese origins in a derogatory way. And he talked about British Empire and Chinese mandarins. And he went into an awful lot of detail. I think you have to do it because I can absolutely guarantee you on transmission, people will pipe up saying in 66, this was a racist character. And if we haven't acknowledged that in some way, we look ignorant. I'm very, very aware of it. And it is baked into him. So we obviously have to change how we do it. So basically on this element, I'm just saying he said he didn't want to focus on any and represent any particular section of society. But I think in Star Beast onwards, some fans would say, well, that's exactly what you have been doing. That's for debate. And then, of course, you've got this, I'm culturally representing the fads at the moment, which is to knock down certain historical things, to reflect a greater racial sensitivity, possibly, that sort of thing. Where do you stand on this element of what he brings to Doctor Who?
But this is ridiculous because if you look at, I mean, the toy maker was a product of its time, with the costume and all of that. But didn't he then sort of like flip that on his head, got Neil Patrick Harris to play the toy maker as German?
Well, he did.
The same sort of thing?
Yes.
And he was British gentleman in the giggle as well.
Yes. And I don't know, it's ridiculous. And like things that happened in the past, why are we apologizing for that now by changing it? I mean, I do understand the changing of the toy maker costume. That's not such a bad thing. But I don't know, it's just hypocritical.
I see all this. Could you put that back up, Brendan?
Yeah.
I see all this over explanation.
I'll go bigger
and
again.
I start to wonder, and I'm asking this seriously, not just trying to come up with another way to knock RTD. I'm wondering, did he bring this toy maker back because it was a great character that he wanted to bring back, or he knew that would give him an excuse to basically knock the original story and boost himself up and show everyone through comments like this how culturally and socially enlightened he is. He says, well, we have to do it. We have to talk about this. Well, okay, so I guess maybe the way to do it then is manufacture, a controversy by bringing back a character, which at the time, again, as Rachel just said, in context at the time, nobody thought about this. Same problem with Talons. Do you keep bringing that up in order for you to show, oh, I'm enlightened, I'm going to knock Talons because that's going to show how, unenlightened I am, or I'm going to make Davros walking because I'm going to show you how enlightened I am because we're not slamming people in wheelchairs or whatever kind of nonsense, that it is. I think you have to kind of bunch all of these together and just really ask, why is he doing this?
Well, why specifically the toy maker as well? Because isn't that like most of that is missing, right? So they've only just recently brought that back in animation. Does it exist in reconstruction as well? I haven't seen reconstruction for it.
Only the last episode exists.
Yeah. So why specifically the toy maker?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, Talons gets mentioned quite often in these kind of discussions, and it was and still is one of my absolute favorites. I think it's amazing, and I think it's misunderstood because I think at the time Robert Holmes was writing a kind of a pastiche of this was almost what Doctor Who would be if it was written for the Strand magazine.
Mm-hmm.
He
was trying to put it
in Manchu.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, in retrospect, but it is in retrospect, I can actually see how you can see lots of the Chinese character in that are racist stereotypes, and you had an actor in Yellowface, and you wouldn't do that now. Well, you wouldn't do it now.
Oh no, you wouldn't do it now.
But that's a piece of archive television from the 1970s, which is to me absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I think it's fine when you're making a program now to ask yourself, how can we represent things? How can we do things such that they are? There is look, to be honest, when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, television was horribly racist and homophobic and sexist. It was a lot of it mainstream entertaining, absolutely disgusting. So you have got to, I think sensitively about what you're putting out now. But I think you can also still respect and understand and put in context things which were done in the past. But I mean, one thing that we had when I was growing up in the UK in the 60s and 70s, outrageous blackface television, the black and white minstrel show. It is disgustingly racist, hugely popular, but disgustingly racist. So we do need to move on. I definitely wouldn't put the Celestial Toymaker in anything like that category. And to be honest, until I'd seen this recent discussion, I hadn't even thought about cultural appropriation, because you watch things like The Avengers in the 1960s, those ITC series, it goes on all the time. When you're doing it now, do it sensitively and with a degree of knowledge and making sure you're not being gratuitously offensive. But I think you also need to understand how things were done in the past and put them into context. But I can't think of things in Doctor Who that were as outrageously offensive as some of those other things I've mentioned.
No, and
Heather, I just want to mention, Heather had a great point. It's kind of gone down in the chat, but her comment was, couldn't RTD have just brought on an actual Chinese person to play the toy maker? Aren't we all about diversity? Well, absolutely true, Heather. It's like, well, we know why he brought on Neil Patrick Harris, because he's a well-known, gay song and dance Broadway star, who RTD personally really liked, and kind of indulged himself that way instead of Heather's very well made point.
Sometimes I think people who want to blast their virtues very publicly, not necessarily indeed, sometimes want their, have their cake and eat it. So basically the very point you've made, Gary, which is, we can't, for various reasons that none of us could really see, the Celestial Toymaker has to be changed. And yet appoints Neil Patrick Harris. So in other words, RTD, how bothered about this issue are you? Because you could have easily as done what you've just said, Gary, and given a Chinese actor the role, and he could have been like a Chinese
Well,
Mandarin.
that was Heather's suggestion.
But this is what I mean. It's having your cake and eat it. Here's my virtue, but I'll still get a Hollywood actor to do this. So how virtuous are you really? And that's when I just get problem. I want good Doctor Who. I want interesting, engaging Doctor Who. I want adventure. When I start getting a little bit of this kind of political messaging going on, then obviously some people will kick back and some people will actually quite rightly say, I've got a question. I want to ask a bit further here because it's all coming one way. And I personally think this is crazy. I mean, so, you know, the giggle and go on. Sorry, Simon.
Sorry, Brendan. I mean, I do want to. So I know a lot of the discussion is about gay issues, and I do want to say that it was fantastic to have a main character who was trans. Now, a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, why are we doing that?" You know, and you were saying, Brendan, well, it's not as dark a place now for gay people as it was in the past, and I think that's largely true. But for trans people, it's a very dark place. It's a very dark place. And I do think it was right to have a prominent trans character in the series and not make a massive issue of it.
I take what you're saying, Simon. But we, you know, I don't know if you'll have seen our streams from the end of the series, because we actually made a point about this, which is if you want to raise trans representation because it's a dark place for them, why did you make the trans character have no role at all in the narrative?
And also the age. I think what they should have done here, I ain't got an issue with a trans character being in it, but what they should have done here was they should have actually, they aged her up anyway, but they should have actually gone more into Donna's future and made the character 18, 19 maybe.
It would have been safer regarding the cast report, etc.
Yeah.
But Simon's right on that point. It's just, do you see what I mean, Simon? That give her a great narrative role, though. Make her really.
Give her something to do.
But what was nice about her is that she was so loved. She was a loved and understood member of that family, and it was quite an ordinary thing.
Yes. Oh yeah, the way
I really am sincerely, honestly surprised that knowing RTD, that character, at least as far as all the publicity that has started to come out this week with cast photos, et cetera, that since Unit is very heavily featured in this new upcoming spinoff, that the Rose character is not part of that. I would have thought absolutely you would have, of all the new Unit characters, you know, that one in there.
Well, I think I saw a picture where Rose might be in it.
Oh, really? Okay.
I wish I had it with me. I had it on the other day, but it was I mean, Russell Davies took the shot on Instagram, and you can see most of the cast members. I wish I had it in front of me, but there was somebody on one end. Now, this quotation, before we started, we talked about a lot about eccentricity. Well, the Doctor's got two hearts. He's 900 and he travels in time and space. He doesn't need funny clothes. This is when they appointed the Ninth Doctor, Chris Eccleston, with his leather jacket. Yeah. The trouble is, and you know, you could say, okay, RTD, you give us lots of quotes, so good for you. But if that's your thinking, has it changed? Because obviously what I've got below is a quote from this year. Not from RTD, but clearly he's the chief exec. And of course, Pam Down is just the costume designer. Shooty wanted one costume. Pam Down said, no, you're going to have a range. And here they are. And these are the words of Gatwa. She laid out her sketches on the table, and I saw kilts and skirts and all kinds of gender-pushing, societal-pushing outfits. And yet the RTD at the top said he doesn't need funny clothes. Now, I know they don't correlate exactly, but what I'm saying is it's an interesting aspect of the program, which is the Doctor's image and the Doctor's silhouette. And in 2005, we've got a showrunner saying he wants him really, I suppose, a bit more kind of, you know, gritty, give him a leather jacket, get him, you know, more acceptable, a bit more than, I don't know. However,
wasn't he? Wasn't Shooty wearing a skirt though in that promo picture where he's on the clock?
I think that's a kilt.
Is it a kilt?
yeah. Whereas on this one, you can see what Shooty has said. We are wearing gender pushing, societal push, and so this seems to be we now are, because some people will say, God, he's wearing strange clothes for the Doctor because he's doing this and doing that. So
be a frilly shirt and a red velvet jacket next.
yeah, shocking. I mean, how can we ever put up with that? but this is the thing, Simon. The first how many Doctors, it was very Edwardian, wasn't it? And that was the silhouette. Tom Baker went a bit bohemian.
Yeah.
Peter Davison's was the first I saw as a kind of cosplay with the cricket. Then we had the silly question marks, and I as a kid I started to get a bit about that. Whereas I see the first 4 Doctors differently. I would see the 9th Doctor differently. I would see the 10th Doctor differently. And actually, to a degree, the Matt Smith one, although the Fez and that was a little bit, again, we're going for gimmicks. But are you seeing the 15th Doctor's imagery and the choices going on there from obviously the chief execs, not Shooty? Are you seeing this as a matchup with all the rest? Or are we seeing something different going on here?
Well, it's something different, isn't it? The thing about the Doctor's costumes, and all of them, like 1 through to including Jodie, if you count Jodie as the Doctor, they all have a distinct outfit that you recognize immediately. And currently, Shooty doesn't have a distinct outfit that you recognize immediately, other than that long brown coat. That one seems to keep coming back. So. And I think for children and young people, for their hero, they need something that they can recognize their hero by.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And yes, I think all the Doctors had some sort of small interchangeable aspect of their costume, didn't they? You know, Tom had the multicolored stuff, and then it turned maroon, and like there was small costume changes here and there, but there was still a very much a fixed point to his costume, wasn't there? The iconic long scarf, the hat, the coat.
Tom had several costumes, but you're right, Rachel. The profile was the same.
Yeah.
But the first time the Doctor was put into a distinct, this is a costume, was season 18, because even though it was the same profile, and even though it was beautiful, a gorgeous costume, it was a costume.
Yeah.
And from that point on in the classic series, all of the Doctors appeared to wear costumes. But although I thought Sylvester was almost back to the old type of idea, the Doctor picking his own clothes. But I feel with Shooty, I've appreciated each costume he's worn, but you're right, we don't yet have a sort of characteristic outfit for his Doctor. And that does seem quite odd.
Yeah, and it may undermine the poor actor, and he's the first black actor to play the Doctor, and you just like with Jodie, you don't want the first person.
Jo Martin.
Oh, sorry, Jo Martin. Yeah, she had a good costume, by the way, didn't she?
She had a fantastic costume.
And the thing about the classic Doctors, and by that I would actually, I would include all the Doctors, even up through Capaldi. What they wore told us about who they were.
Yes.
And it was more than just like a quick visual reference. I mean, if you sat there and broke down, what do Pertwee's kind of, smoking jackets tell us about the character? What does even what Chris Eccleston wore tell us about this Doctor? I think that this is what really is going to ultimately make Shooty's Doctor later on very, indistinct and unmemorable, is that there's nothing like that. He's not wearing an outfit that kind of tells us about himself. It's like an insight into what this Doctor likes or values or likes to be or whatever for every given episode, he's changing. He's a chameleon. We never really know why is he wearing that orange jumper at the start of 73 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just there to be there, you know, and I think it's working against making this doctor really, well, it's one of the several things that's working against making this doctor really, you know, memorable. It's just basically, okay, you know.
Yeah. Babette, thank you. J&T's costume was about marketing. Everyone had uniforms rather than clothing.
Yes.
Sean Cryer. Yeah, right, Simon. But I don't count anything beyond Paul McGann these days. Okay. Now,
I was just going to say on Shooty's doctor. I mean, how are we going to dress Shooty for the 70th anniversary episode, the 20 Doctors? Which costume are we going to put him in?
Oh, I know. And which will be the go-to one?
Yeah.
Now just
where's that graphic? You know, Brendan had that great graphic about all the various outfits and stuff. And I remember Rachel saying, like, you know, see, this is why we can't like focus in on any one thing, because there's too many choices.
Now I wanted to say this because actually people talk in code about RTD, and I think that the truth is this. And this is the tragic element, you know, the personal loss in his life. And some people have said he's a changed man. Well, in some way, you're stating the obvious. We all change through traumas and things that happen in our life. So in that respect, with that, but he did give a quotation about this. He said, he looked after his partner, you know. Fair enough. I had the money saved up, so nothing was a worry. We had 7 years of that illness together, and it's lovely to come and talk about my shows, but that's the greatest work I'll ever do on this earth. I remind Davies that he once said early on that if Andrew had a heart attack, he would probably walk over his body to write his script. And he said, all nonsense. I surprised myself because I thought my work was more important to me. I thought I'd have got a nurse in. I would never, ever have done that. He was a bit disabled, but quite able-bodied, so I didn't have to do the dirty end of caring, but nonetheless, I was there. He wasn't steady on the stairs. I was with him night and day to help him and get every meal ready. I think it was important for me to show this because people are talking in code saying, oh, well, you know, he lost, you know, something happened and he's changed. Yes, I think 7 years of caring for your partner, I think would change you and give you a different perspective. I'm fascinated, though, everybody, that, you know, sometimes our argument can sound, I don't mean our argument, but, you know, fans' argument about the TARDIS having a ramp, the wheelchair-bound unit advisor. But actually, when you think of what he's faced for 7 years, as an example, you wonder whether he is actually more sensitive to some aspects of what's going on, rather than me just going for an easy shout-out criticism. Do you know what I mean?
And I think the ramp and having disabled actors in it, for many people, it's not going to mean anything. But to a disabled child watching Doctor Who, thinking, "Oh my God, there's some representation for me." I know that's probably going to create floods of people saying, "Oh, I've gone massively woke." Too late for that. I went massively woke a long time ago. I think it really means something. I think it's rather wonderful, actually.
Now, I'll just mention for a moment, because that's real life, you know, and you know, he is going to bring that to it. Of course he is. We've said as many, which fan has never mentioned Davros? We've hinted at Davros today. Do you think it is possible that what happened in real life for him means that he does actually truly find Davros problematic? You know, I don't know. I mean, I have a problem with it, but
we can't. Well, I would say we can't psychoanalyze, and maybe some people can. I mean, I can't do it. I have to say, for me, that Davros was a wonderful character, and I'd have no problem at all having Davros back as he was in previous series. And I've been discussing this with a couple of friends recently, including people who are wheelchair users. I think it's a great character. I know what he was trying to do. I wouldn't have done it with that character. I didn't think that was necessary. But yeah, as I said, the idea of having a wheelchair ramp, I think that's a lovely little touch. We might not see much of it again, but for some people, it's going to mean something.
Yeah. it was just interesting to see. Now, in the documentary, he mentioned that he'd already written. This is obviously in 2023, early on when he did the interview. He'd already written 2025, and he was writing 2026. He's racing ahead. Now, this other aspect we kind of touched on earlier with the going against Anton Deck, but he talks about it in a different way here. So again, has he got it right what Doctor Who is and should be? Let's have a look. This is what I'm fascinated by. So fun, that's the word I keep on using. That's the word I worry about when other writers' scripts get too dark. Optimistic, fun. And to be optimistic and have fun, there's got to be a darkness there. I think that's a very British attitude. So you go, okay, I'll buy into that if there's a lot of... he can get the balance. But then, of course, I've got the quote from more recently when he says, I think it's part of the show going forward, to be honest, to have lots of breaking the fourth wall, because that's fun. To have lots more music and songs, because that's fun. I think it's his concept of fun within Doctor Who, knowing what we've earlier said, whether he's going for a different type of show. I know in the thread a lot earlier, somebody said, should he have written the Rocky Horror Show instead? Because... Doctor Who was never, let's do a song and dance routine. And what a shame we had Roy Castle in the movie. We could have had him doing a song and dance routine and got his trumpet out. But fun, he's obsessed with the word fun. I have to say, this is my concern. Does he understand what Doctor Who was always? Give or take a bit of City of Death and a lovely scene with John Cleese. Little touches like that. Has he missed the point, or has he got it right regarding what 2024 needs?
I don't think he's remotely interested in writing well thought out sci-fi drama anymore. I mean, between this and the Ant and Deck quote, clearly he wants like light entertainment, with the Doctor Who trappings. That's why he wants to emphasize fantasy. In his own words, he's going full on fantasy as opposed to sci-fi because fantasy has no rules. He doesn't have to worry about, as in his earlier quote said, connecting A to B or having everything slot together perfectly as, real sci-fi needs. There's a cause and effect and everything is taken care of. Fantasy has no rules. You can have a gigantic pink bunny show up out of the sky at the end and solve everything because, hey, presto changeo, it's fantasy, So I in all of these quotes, I just have, and I've been really paying attention and looking at the quotes. It doesn't seem that his focus is on serious sci-fi family drama anymore. He's not mentioned that once in all of this.
Thing is, when he says things like that, I think then I just want to say, well, then leave the show and go on create something new and get someone in who knows how to write that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's right there.
Sorry, Rachel. That's an interesting point because we started off kind of like what was the legacy of RTD. Now, in a sense, his legacy isn't known until he finally finishes with the show. Yeah. But one aspect, one element of his legacy we can see already is he brought it back, and it was a major success. So that is part of his legacy. I don't know whether before, the 60th anniversary specials, the Disney deal, I don't know whether Doctor Who was in any way in jeopardy with the BBC. I don't know that. Russell has almost suggested in quotes that it was. He suggested that the BBC itself was in trouble, and so therefore he saw the Disney deal as a way of making sure Doctor Who continued. But I think we've got to give him a huge amount of credit for bringing it back in the first place, establishing it as a very successful program.
Yeah.
What's happened in the last year or so with the 60th anniversaries and particularly season 1, it's become a massive international success. That's probably taken it into areas where some of us are slightly less comfortable in terms of tone and narrative style. But what would be interesting, and I don't, I'm not saying goodbye, Russell. I think a few people are on the chat. I'm not saying that, but it would be interesting to know what somebody else would do with it, because he's had 2 goes. He's had his original go, and he's back again. We've seen what Stephen Moffat did with it. We've seen what Chris Chibnall did with it, both of which I really enjoyed as well, actually, although they're very different. But yeah, it would be interesting if at some point when Russell does move on again, and if the program continues, to see what someone else would do with it.
Every time you say something, Simon, I'm bouncing around slides to match up what you've just said. But I'll go on your last point. So on this one, you've been talking about give somebody else possibly a chance and see what they can do with it. He said a lot earlier on, I think this is from the Writer's Tale, that he was down to have a meeting with George Lucas about writing a new Star Wars TV series. And he said the thought of writing more years typing interior spaceship and playing with other people's toys. I mean, no matter how much I love Doctor Who, it's not mine. Yeah. I didn't create this show. Oh, well. And you think that's appropriate. It's not your show. I think there's been I think we all feel as though he's appropriated a bit more lately. Added to this, there was a discussion of a Star Trek Doctor Who crossover way back. This was in the Writer's Tale.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Well, they did it in the comics.
Yeah, that's fair enough in the comics. Yeah.
But it was going to be, but Enterprise was axed, so therefore they couldn't do it. They were going to do it with television. It's in the Writer's Tale. So when we think of the San Diego Comic-Con, it brings into play some interesting thoughts here. And as you know, recently he also said, I'm serious. I just wish science fiction was like child's imagination and all these properties could cross because they're doing your head when you're 8. I don't know what 8-year-olds he knows. We made a point about that. My Star Wars figures never matched with the Doctor Who ones. But the crossover thing, it doesn't go away. And while you've got RTD as the showrunner, all bets are off.
Well, I mean, I agree with Simon in that, we can't. I mean, we're not trying to dismiss, at least I'm not trying to dismiss RTD totally, because his success in bringing it back does have to be acknowledged. And I think this picture of George Lucas is, especially appropriate, because does the fact that him doing the Phantom Menace invalidate the original Star Wars? And no, it doesn't. I mean, his coming up with the original Star Wars, not only changed the culture, changed the world, and him coming up with, Jar Jar Binks later, or Attack of the Clones, or whatever movie that may not work out great, doesn't invalidate that. I mean, it all has to be considered, together. I mean, the person who brought the show back with with Chris Eccleston, we can't forget that he's the one that gave us Rogue. It all has to be considered together and not kind of parsed out.
I'm hearing Sean Cryer as well. Can we just have someone new? And I think what we mean is fresh blood, just fresh ideas. Look, RTD might be a really decent man trying his best, but because you've already had a go at the game and you're linking to the old era as well, he's matching things up. I think give somebody a new go. Somebody might want to go in a different way. I personally would really like somebody who respects the Doctor Who brand so much that they don't want to copy any other show and they don't want to mash up with any other show. They want to make Doctor Who as distinctive as it always has been. Well, I wanted to show you this, not this one, don't worry. 2 quotes from Russell Davies on the Rose character, the original ones, you may say. And of course, here we are. I'll just show there. And I think this is something that seems to get repeated in how he thinks, that the companion completes the Doctor. And we had this with Millie Gibson's Ruby Sunday. Yeah. And my question's going to be in a minute, does the thread and do the panel think this is our understanding of what Doctor Who should be or always should have been, and the classic series was missing this, or is this a misstep? it's complete inner circle. He's male, he's alien, he's a traveler. Between the two of them together, they complement each other and discover each other and are in love with each other. Now, apparently, Ruby Sunday and this doctor loved each other too. They just took the words out. In the end, I sort of thought we created a companion who was so alive and dynamic and so wedded to the doctor that you'd need a whole universe to contain her in, hence what he did it with Doomsday. So he's done this since 2005. He's repeated it in season 1. Is this a misstep or has he got it right? And this is a new kind of way of doing Doctor Who, because I feel as though we're never focusing on Doctor Who. We're focusing on the companion. But that's just me.
I just want to mention, sorry, Rachel, you go first.
No, you go first.
Well, I just wanted to mention Amy and Rory.
Yes.
With Matt Smith's Doctor. Those 3 characters brilliantly complemented each other and they loved each other. So I think it can work really well. If we go back to the classic series, I think fairly often the companion wasn't that well drawn. So if you write it properly, the Doctor and their companion or companions can complement each other and work really well as a sort of almost like a collective. We've barely ever seen the Doctor on his own. Is it only Deadly Assassin when he was completely on his own? Well,
and the very last scene in the Massacre where he does that
Heaven Sent
monologue, where he's sitting, everybody's left me, and then Stephen comes back, and then Dodo comes in,
and Heaven Sent as well.
And Heaven Sent, but the Doctor on his own couldn't sustain the series. He does need one or more companions. It just depends how well they're written, how well the companions are drawn, how well they're acted. But for me, Matt Smith with Amy and Rory, that is perfection.
I'm interested you've said that, because although that's a Stephen Moffat thing, isn't it?
It is a Stephen Moffat thing.
That basically they all had they were similar ages. Actually, you had 3 actors in the TARDIS of a similar age, which I always thought sounded as though the chemistry. Who's the senior one type thing, and Matt Smith managed very ably, because to be a young actor with 2 other young actors in the TARDIS crew, and he had to establish that he was the gaffer, he was the Doctor,
but he wasn't always. Amy was often the gaffer.
Amy was the controller in that bunch. She'll even say it.
So it's an interesting concept on this one. Now, just on time, I'm going to throw a few things at you and just get your opinion on what RTD's done with this, that, and the other. But so bounce in if you want. So just to give you an idea, this on the left is the audition script for Shooty, and in part of it, a lot of it's a bit dull actually. But this bit is interesting. It's a time machine. It travels in time and space because I'm not from Earth. I'm a Time Lord. I came from another universe, but the Time Lords adopted me, and that's my heritage now, the very last Time Lord in existence. And on the right is a quote from this year when he talked about he's not really interested in the timeless child concept as sold by Chibnall. He's seen it. You have to come from it emotionally. The Doctor's a foundling. If you do it that way, he's an orphan who doesn't know who his parents are. Then there's rich emotional territory. As a writer, he'd be more into that. So he does seem to be wanting to say the Doctor is no longer Gallifreyan. The Doctor's no longer a Time Lord. Is everybody happy, sad about that? Basically,
it's established in the narrative. You want quick answers, so I'll only give you a quick answer, but I could do an hour and a half on this, because as an adopted person who never knew who his parents were until I found out about 7 years ago, this really speaks to me. So I think it's really powerful, but it's in the narrative. Now, actually, the showrunner could just change the narrative if they wanted to. Doctor Who's that kind of show. But it is in the narrative now.
And actually, what you're saying, Simon, is exactly what Chris Chibnall wanted to do in the first place, because he's adopted, isn't he? And he wanted to I suppose when he was a little kid, he had to write stories where the Doctor was adopted, so to speak, just to kind of bring himself into it. And so that's why he did the Time as Children. That's what he said. He did that for that very reason.
I didn't know that, but yeah.
Yeah. So it makes sense, doesn't it, Simon, that that's what he's tried to bring to it. And of course, a writer, a good writer like RTD is, will say, God, there's emotional, you know, heavyweight stuff to actually making the Doctor a foundling.
Really quick, I totally resonate with Simon's comments about 11, Amy and Rory. That's my favorite era of all of New Who. I think it was like absolute perfection. I wish that had never ended. I will say that one of the many reasons why I love and will always love Classic Who more than New Who, because Classic Who was about the adventures that the Doctor and his companions went on. It wasn't about the Doctor himself. It wasn't obsessed with, you know, Doctor Who, as the blue guy said, you know, and finding out all about who his, you know, parents or who his loves are, or who his, you know, third cousin's brother is, or whatever. It's like the Doctor should be an essentially mysterious, unknowable character who we want, who you know, takes us on the adventures with him. It's not about parsing to the last detail every aspect of his 1,000 years, you know, and everything that he's ever been. So, but I think that's the cycle that we're going to be trapped in, because that seems to be what television now and the creators are all about, is about, you know, those kind of background elements. It's not, I don't know, maybe the idea of, maybe the ability to write a character who is essentially in many ways a cipher, and have that be the core of the show and not changing while everything goes on around him. Maybe that's, which they did great for 26 years. Maybe that's just not where we are anymore.
Maybe if he is adopted, but we, like with the Time War, we don't go there again. Let's just leave it. He's now a mystery. He knows nothing about it. Rachel, have you got any input in the game there, or are you happy for me to move on?
No, I'm happy for you to move on, but I wouldn't have used that as the audition.
Yeah. Have you seen the audition ones? I can send you them.
No, I've not seen them, but I wouldn't have given him that one. I would have given him something where it's talking about the laws of time.
It's one of those where there's a bit of fun on it. So again, we know in the giggle we had the bi-generation. RTD in the magazine said, "Oh, I'm going to unroll a whole new mythology for you based around the events that take place. It's going to rock the world, blah blah blah." And I'm dying to see your reaction. Now we now know the reaction. If anybody wants to give a fairly concise point about whether bi-generation is just adding to the mythology, or we've got a writer who's tampering too much with the regeneration and possibly undermining it. I'm saying that with a view to Stolen Earth, where you start getting hoax regenerations, you know?
I think it's undermining the actors here, actually, more than anything. No clean, I think so. No clean starts. It's like they know that, it's like he knows that there is a huge risk changing the premise of the Doctor so vastly that he needs to do something like that, because at least then he has a fallback, despite what he said in the Radio Times recently about the David Tennant's Doctor dying in Venice. That was a load of rubbish, but I think, you know, he knew he was taking a risk, so he needed that sort of answer to fall back on. That's what I think.
The trouble was, as you know, in Unleashed, he said that every Doctor's possibly still alive, and that's that. You know, that's. I mean, he gave a very
anything that he mentions in the Unleashed doesn't. If it's not in the actual show, it doesn't count.
Oh, and also, sorry, Gary. No. I think they want to go down the route of the Whoniverse multiverse kind of thing that they do with Disney and the MCU and Marvel and all of that.
That worked out so well.
It worked
in Phase 4
absolutely
for Marvel.
brilliantly. You know, absolutely brilliant, absolutely fantastic. I mean, I mean, Deadpool and Wolverine was a great product of it, though, wasn't it? It was just like,
Yeah,
I love that.
you're right, but
I love
what that one movie out of what, 13?
So
But Brendan, I just want to ask, was there a single episode stream when we were all discussing like the episode of the week, right, and picking it apart?
Yeah.
Was there any given week where at some point the plot hole that was created by the existence of the bi-generation didn't come up? Like, for example, how many episodes did we started out with, why doesn't he go get the 14th Doctor who's mowing the lawn over at Donna's house? Why doesn't he go get his help against Sutek? I mean, the bi-generation may have seemed clever, and I'm sure that RTD was 1,000 different kinds of pleased with himself for coming up with the concept, but it opened so many narrative plot holes that it's caused way more trouble than
RTD said in God, I've seen so many interviews this year since I started streaming, I can't cope with them all, but he did say that he had an idea for the bi-generation because he'd always, as a writer, wanted to have a story where the old Doctor doesn't go straight away. He liked dramatically that idea that you had them both there. So
there are different ways. There were other ways that could have been done.
I agree.
I slightly take it though that and I think you might have said it before, Gary, that in his original run, it was the end of the Earth, the end of the solar system, the end of the universe, the end of reality. It's almost like bi-generation is like pushing again even further, trying to find something even more dramatic.
Yeah, and look at the thread are not buying into there's certain
bi-generation.
Yeah, there's certain things that just aren't working. I mean, we are fair. Actually, I will say this, that the thread and our community on Senssphere, we don't tend to bite, we don't tend to just critique like mad, but it has become problematic. This bi-generation was a misstep, I personally think, because it opened, as you said, Gary, a can of worms. And I actually think if you're going to write any drama, and of course I haven't, if you're going to write drama, surely you need jeopardy. And if bi-generation means all the Doctors in parallel worlds are still surviving, when I watch the next regeneration story, I don't give a damn. I don't care. Because they don't die.
Should we find a way of killing the bi-generated 14th Doctor?
Yes, let's kill him, Simon. Yes.
An actual death of the Doctor with no regeneration.
Oh my God, sounds like James Bond.
Now I'm not sure how to pronounce. I apologize for not knowing how to pronounce the first name of the poster. Is it Reese? Reese Rodas? Is it Reese? I'm sorry about that. Forgive me. Or he says, "Don't the bi-generated Doctors all have TARDISes? So does each TARDIS carry Sutek?" Oh. Well, yes. When he hit it with the Looney Tunes hammer, and created the new TARDIS, did Sutek jump from one TARDIS to the other, or did the hammer create a new Sutek too?
No damn.
We know what if we ever had a countdown of like the top 10 worst Doctor Who. Sutek being there since Pyramids of Mars on top of the TARDIS, the Timeless Children and the bi-generation would have to be in some order, like in the top 3.
Well, yeah, because as you know, we only mentioned it last time, didn't we? But just as a joke, we said, and I'd be intrigued to ask Simon, out of all the stories since 75, from Frontiers, there were certain ones where you're going, God, if Sutek is sat on the TARDIS, this is problematic. But, we started taking a mick out of this with our little item. Here we go. And that's all, Simon, because in a recent quotation with SFX magazine of just this month, RTD says that Sutek is asleep on the TARDIS since 75.
What, like Snoopy?
Yep. Yep. He's hiding and he's asleep because he knows he's caused a stir. And so now he says, I don't want to change the mythology of Doctor Who. He's just been hiding, waiting for the right moment. So hence we now play the game. Where's Sutek sleeping now?
So the TARDIS blowing up and creating the crack didn't wake him up.
No.
The TARDIS being
Astrovalva?
broken apart in Frontios didn't wake him up. Really? Okay, RTD.
Well, in which case I could do with some of what Sutex have.
There you go.
I've got terrible insomnia myself.
It's
You know,
shocking.
he says these things and doesn't make them part of the show, and thinking that just because he comes up with some random explanation to kind of get people off his back that's valid. It's not.
It's a shame, but yeah, I'll just throw it out there because as we get close to the end and the thread, if there's any question you've got, send it now fast. But just to prove I don't lie, I am showing you exactly what was said. So basically, you can see in blue there. We needed to bring back a great big old enemy. This is the same show. That's not for me now. I've moved away from Doctor Who. This is, he knows those fans who've left. So Sutek was to bring them back. And then he's got a further quote where he says he's hiding. So,
What
you can just
rubbish.
Say what you think.
And this is true for this, and it's true for politics. Anytime you have to walk back something, you've already lost the argument.
Yeah. And look, instinctively, these are dead fast ones. Look at this. Everybody was rumored saying Claire Bloom in End of Time was the Doctor's mum. And Davies says in the writer's tale, she was intended to be the Doctor's mother, but then they're pulled back on that one. And as usual, we saw this with 73 yards. We saw with a lot of lack of explanation this season. He says, it's up to you. The trouble is, though, you're sowing the seed, RTD. So fans are suddenly going, well, that was the Doctor's mum. That was that. I don't know. What, Simon, you look as though you're thinking,
I'm in a bit of pain. That's all right.
Oh, no, sorry. I thought you were going to say,
well, wait a minute. If we know that Time Lords now, if it's all of a sudden been revealed that Time Lords can change genders, how do we know that the guy not standing behind that woman isn't the Doctor's mother?
Good point. Very true. Very true. Helen Mirren.
See what happens when you open up the can of worms?
I know. Helen Mirren was approached to play in Doctor Who. She's been asked a few times, he said, in the writer's tale, and she politely says no every time, which is fair enough. Yeah, so we've I don't know. There's loads and loads and loads and loads. But I think just to kind of wrap up on this, I just wanted to take you to... He said he was brought back for a very strong reason, and the reason was the ratings. And so therefore, I will be honest with you and ask you all a question about this one. So basically here, this is from SFX magazine. Sorry, this is from Radio Times. Got to get this right. I was brought back to bring in a younger audience that's been massively successful. The audience no one ever gets are the under 30s. They just don't watch television anymore. But those figures are astronomical for Doctor Who. It's their top program in that bracket. I never thought it was possible, to be honest, but according to the people who juggle the numbers, all targets have been reached and exceeded. The BBC are running around like mad things. Sounds a bit like David Cameron saying that the Queen is purring when there was the Scottish referendum debate and he misspoke. There's our update on the ratings for Doctor Who since 2005. And you can see I've drawn very badly the figures, the highest point and the lowest point with a red eye and a green eye where the season 1 was. So he was brought back to get the figures up. He explains later on in SFX magazine. There's the figures for the whole season. If you compare overnights, they go down. If you compare 7 days, they go down. If you compare 28 days, they go down. And I did.
Brendan, I'm curious.
Yeah.
If everyone is so rapturously happy with this that they're doing cartwheels in the halls of the BBC, why not show us the audience appreciation figures?
Do we not have those?
No,
because that would be interesting. I agree.
They've decided, the BBC this year, Simon, for the first time ever, that they'll never ever show them.
Well, okay, that they would be interesting. I agree.
There would
And
be.
why don't we? And why doesn't Disney then give us their figures? If it's greater than anything they ever could have expected, why don't we see the Disney Plus figures?
Yeah. And problem being, good to see you, Lee. Sorry, RTD is talking out the side of his mouth. 1 minute, it's all about bringing in this mythical new audience, and the next, he's bringing some approximation of Sutek back to win back classic fans. That is the problem. So anyway,
I'm not as worried. I am not as worried about viewing figures, because television just doesn't work like that anymore. Most people do not watch linear television. They watch it in streaming. So that doesn't worry me. I am more interested in the audience appreciation figures.
Yeah. Well, the 28-day includes all streaming, using laptops, using tablets. And so the 28-day figure is the one that actually the BBC and the media lovies are all trying to actually tell us now is the figure we should look at.
Yeah. But that's worse than Flux.
And that's worse than Flux. That's 21% down in the season from episode 1, Space Babies, to Empire of Death. And there's the actual figures. So
what is happening with the rest of television? Are we comparing it with other bits of TV?
I mean, it's still between the top 10 and the top 20 for the week as a program.
And I think Russell was saying it was the highest viewed drama program in the week. So I'm not sure. I mean, we can argue about audience figures. Audience figures would have been massively more in the 1970s in the UK, when there were only three channels. The choices we have now are just almost infinitesimal.
Do you think, Simon, though, there's an issue about, like our world is obsessed with targets nowadays?
Yeah, they would have had targets for the show, and he's saying they've beaten them. I don't know what the targets were.
Yeah, but the point is, though, that the way they measure their targets changes to make it look better. You know how bosses work sometimes. It's like, it's not quite that figure, it's this figure. And I find it fascinating. I'm not knocking RTD. I'm knocking the whole of the media world, which is interesting because, as you know, Simon, if I get a view on this channel, it's one view. If people watch this channel 5 times, bless them, it's one view. There's no way I can doctor my figures. The figures are one person at a time. That's it. But the media lovies and executives have concocted this new metric, which is no longer you watch once, you count as once. If you have somebody out there who watches the episode 20 times, it's 20 views. Now, that sounds as though we're trying to just inflate because, as you say, the world is watching less TV. But why can't we just be honest and just have the TV is losing? Maybe the TV lovies don't actually want to say that television is losing its impact and its.
It is, though. It is.
It is, but why don't they just tell us the real figures? The overnight, because the point is, Simon, the 28-day figures, which become the 76-day figures and all the rest of it, why don't we have Ark in Space up there and say, oh, Ark in Space is still beating
Ark in Space will beat almost everything.
It would. It was a bad example by me.
In more ways than ratings, by the way.
But Brendan, then how does all this pretzel twisting exist in a world where you have like skyrocket viewing figures, like for the post office drama, or for things like even when Gladiators comes back, which absolutely make the case that if the shows are well done and people are interested in watching them, they will sit down on the night and make the effort to watch them overnight. The two can't exist in the same world. Either nobody watches TV in the same way anymore, or people in a large part do watch the way they used to watch, but they're watching only the stuff that they're really interested in. All of this is just doctoring.
Yeah, maybe on another occasion, Brendan, you can get someone from the sort of TV industry who understands how these things work.
And honestly,
someone, a TV analyst who would be able to say, who would be able to have some kind of valid way of saying, well, that's actually really good, or no, it's rubbish. I'm not an expert on how the TV industry works.
And I will publicly say, if there's somebody out there who's willing to do that, come on, because I would be very interested in how it can be explained through. But I always go to Rachael on this one because I find it interesting that the media that we're talking about is television, etc., and they have changed their metric for what makes them successful. Whereas an actress and the theatre, an overnight is an overnight. You either fill that seat or you don't, and they can't do a compounding of 28 days or anything. I'm fascinated by the theatre world will either sell out or you go bust and the show finishes early. But the media television world will change the figures and change how they do it.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say to that because, well, you're right. Theatre does rely on ticket sales. Whereas, to be honest, I don't fully know or understand how the viewing figures work and how they sort of like rate it, per se.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that this is not great. I really can't have much of an answer. But yes, theatre, you have to rely on the ticket sales.
The thing is, and I know what you're saying, Simon. We don't understand the technicalities of how they do it and how they compare. However, it is valid to say whether it's overnight, 7-day, or 28-day, they've lost viewers.
Yeah, no, I accept. I accept that. What I don't know is the relevance of that compared to what else is happening in the TV industry. Yeah.
Which, of course, we know as Brits, if you go from May to July, or it gets hopefully in a normal year sunnier. Therefore, less people are watching TV at the time. But I suppose the 28-day figures then pick that up because you can watch it at 2 a.m. or whenever people.
And it's not because people are tired of the concept, because then why do the Blu-ray collection sets sell out in a day every single time they're released?
Yeah.
It's not because people are tired of the show or the parts of it that they like. Clearly the audience is still there if they can figure out how to access it.
Yeah. Well, that was the show. That was our kind of going over as much as we could. We looked at some of the stories. We looked at what we thought had impact there. We've tried to cover what's been relevant to where we feel we are with Doctor Who by generation, etc., etc. How the companions are treated does seem to come into lots of discussion. But there you go. And Lee Smith, you're there at the end. You're the one who said I should do this. So you're talking about poor quality writing and low ratings. Not hard to work it out. Lee Smith, what's our next trick? What's our next target? We should rest with that.
He's talking about Doctor Who. He's not talking about this show.
Yeah. How very dare you? Yes, I know. Anyway, thank you, the thread. Thank you, the panel, for your time tonight.
Yes, great chat.
I found it interesting, and it was a panel structured, so I appreciate everybody was bringing different things to it. We don't have a strong opinion as an echo chamber. We all have autonomy, and so I appreciate that, because I do like the sense sphere when we have different opinions out there. So thank you, Rachael. And Rachael, before we go, give us a heads up on your channel, please, on what you're showing.
Well, I've had a bit of a smack on the wrist at the moment from the YouTube people for talking about things that apparently is not great, but yeah, whatever, I don't care. So we're fighting past suppression at the moment. So today I released an episode on survival. I've got a Doctor Who video coming out tomorrow. I'm covering Acolyte on Tuesday, and then I'm probably going to get suppressed again on Wednesday when I cover the Paralympics, because I've got a video on that one. But next Sunday is really the one that you should definitely jump on and watch, because I've got Will Hadcroft coming back on the channel.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah.
I think all of your streams are worth jumping on and watching.
Thank you, Gary. But yes, so he's coming on. We've already recorded it, actually. We've already done it. It's already uploaded, ready to go, set as a premiere. So join us for an hour and 45-minute interview just before the Sense Sphere, and then you can come on and jump onto the Sense Sphere.
There you go.
Does Will Hadcroft know what you think about Tom Baker? I'm kidding. I'm
I
Yeah,
don't
let's
know.
let's
I'm
all write the,
kidding.
let's all tell Will Hadcroft now. No,
No.
Thanks,
So-
Joanna and Dragon.
oh well, that's cool. Well, gosh, she's going to be knackered next Sunday. But there you go. Thank you for your time, everybody. And that
Oh
was
well, can I
Yep.
advertise myself? I'm on the I'm on John
you're on
Youlden's
everything.
Sci-Fi Chronicles, where
Sci-Fi Chronicles
we're
79.
going sequentially through reviewing all the Doctor Who stories, starting obviously with Unearthly Child. We just recorded a couple weeks ago. We recorded coincidentally enough the Sensorites,
And it just so happens I might appear, even though you've already recorded. Me and John
Yes.
have been discussing, and how dare they? The Sci-Fi Chronicles 79 have done the Sensorites without inviting the Sensphere. You may see me appear at a window.
Yes.
And yes. So yes, of course, the Sci-Fi Chronicles.
And those are great
79.
discussions because we always find kind of like new insights, and it's not like, oh, well, this story is bad, this story is good. There's always something there to value about, you know, every classic Doctor Who stories, and it's great.
Well,
Divining Dragon, I'm not sure the link.
go to Sci-Fi Chronicles 79.
John, if you're still in the chat, put the link in the chat.
But if you look up
Johnny.
Sci-Fi Chronicles 79 on YouTube,
Sci-Fi Chronicles, yeah.
79 has to have the 79.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, then, everyone. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate this, and I know a lot of you on my panel have been running around, and you've hardly been just waiting for the stream to start. You've been busy, so thank you very much for your time. So, good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good
See you
night.
again. Bye.
Subscribe.